Okay, how's everybody doing? Okay, so I just want to show you this basic grain vacuum system. Okay, it's a sort of convenient to a sort of transload facility where it's not right beside a building, let's say, but they can be though. And this is, well, here, let me show you the photo first. So I want to have a sort of an outside grain vacuum system with hatches in the trucks with a silo underneath, which you don't see, where the grain car gets pushed over the silo. They've been doing this for decades, except the older ones had like a grain elevator. They had a pit on the side and it would just go up a grain elevator slope and then up the elevator. And then it would be redistributed into trucks. Whereas this one here, the one I'm doing, is this vacuum system here, and this pipe goes down into the silo where the grain gets dumped into this hatch. They push the car over each hatch, or they could probably have 4 or 3 depending on the car. There's probably a lot of different configurations like this. So all the grain goes down to a big silo, and then here's the air dryer. Okay, and then the vacuum system here with the manifold up here. So it sucks this, so this main big hose, which is probably 4 or 5 inch, sucks the grain up into here, and then it goes back down into another delivery system. Where it is, I'm not really sure. It's out of view, a picture, but mine's just going to be the building, and it's going to go, one of the lines is going to go into the building. That's the idea, okay? This is the main sort of air dryer component, okay? And then I'm going to modify it a little bit to suit my particular situation by the brewery. So here's the manifold. So this goes on here like that, okay? And this is all tubing, like it's all telescoping evergreen tubing. And if it doesn't telescope into the next size, you just take a drill. You know, if drills, I'll just mention this, like if you're going to be a scratch builder or you want to get into the art of it or practice of it, make sure you get the best drill bits you can possibly get your hands on, like hobby drill bits. These are from Japan. They're called God Hand. They're getting hard to get, like the smaller ones are, and I broke a few. But believe me, I really reefed on them though to break them. They're not like those paper ones that you usually get. But these are just awesome. And this is a cheap mandrel, but it's a quick release, right? As long as you don't lose this. But I like it because I can just go like that, pop it out, pop a drill in, and then just snug it up. Or I can just do it by hand too a lot of times. But if I want to, like for example, like this piece of tubing was just not wide enough, the opening, to take in this 80 thou. So all I did was I just took my drill bit and I just honed it out a bit, right? And so now it takes it beautifully, right? So that's what that is. So I use little tubes for couplers and I slice them thin for clamps, etc. You can get quite creative with this. And then just before I close on this, you can see the canister, the vacuum canister, which is going to go somewhere like this. And I wrapped it with 10 thou. I just did riveting on the one side of the sheet and then rolled it. Okay. You can see a lot of this kind of technique if you go to the tug build, which eventually I'll finish. But this was the winch for it. And it's the same technique. I built it from a photo. Whereas this one I built the base plate first, so I knew roughly the footprint to build on, but I left it larger and then trimmed it down later. And I did the same with this, with the platform. I knew the footprint I basically needed and then built it up and larger on a larger footprint and then just scored and snapped and just brought it to size, right? Okay, so this will eventually go on here like this, and it doesn't have to be exact, right? Like here's the photo one more time. okay? It doesn't have to be exact. This yellow panel box is just straight rectangular material. Just cut a chunk off, just off the strip. Put a little trim on it and glued it in place. Done, right? I think I used a few parts, so technically this is a bit of a kit bash. There's this little head here, this little electrical box is old style from the 1930s switch stand from Rapido, believe it or not. Drilled a hole, that works, right? And then for this, just in closing on this vacuum canister. So this is an old vent from I think a O scale or something, or double O. So I'm going to cut that because I don't want to, I don't have a vacuum form machine anymore, so I don't want to create a dome. And if you can't make a dome nice and symmetrical, they just don't look good. So I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to mount that on here so it's down lower with a bit of a dome head on it. And then I'll just take a piece of tubing, that strip, see? And then I'll just glue that on like this. And then sheet it. And then just trim it, because it's the same way I do. Like to cap the end of tube is easy. You just take some glue and you just push the tube down, give it a little twist, let it dry, and then just nibble off the edge and then just sand it smooth, and it makes a nice cylinder. Or you can leave a little bit like a lip as well, right? Okay. So once you get into it, practice it, build a few simple things, build a transformer box, you know, doors, anything that's rectangular, legs that's right angle. Just try stuff, right? You know, and you'll surprise yourself, okay? I just wanted to point out something before I close on this. See this little funnel here? So it's a bit crude, right? I mean, they look good, accurate and symmetrical, but the way I do it is I just cut a hole with a circle cutter. This is by Olfa. Every scratch builder should have one of these. Just look up Olfa, O-L-F-A. You can find these at stationery shops. Okay, Olfa circle cutter has spare blades in here. When you need one, they're beautiful. You won't use it much, but when you do, it'll come in handy. And basically, you just push it into the center and you just scribe around. You just keep scribing, turning around, and then you get a nice scribe mark and you can pop out. Especially on the thin material, you can just pop it out, you can break it away. And then I just cut a line from the center. I drill a hole. This one I messed up. See, it's off center a bit. But it's been scribed already, you can see. See? And basically, I'll just show you this roughly how you do it. You just cut a line like this. You need to drill a hole where your pick point was from your compass, right? Leave a little indentation, and then you just grab it like this. I remember making these when we were kids, a witch's hat in school, paper craft and so on. And you just pull one side over the other, and the tighter you pull it, the smaller the diameter is. So you got to fiddle around with it, and then you got to glue it off. Don't worry if there's a little bit overlapping, that you can trim that off. but you want to try to get it square if you can. Put a bit of cement to start it and then just leach in some underneath there. Clamp it. Okay, remember that hole's off center, right? This is just a scrap piece. This is the finished one here. And you glue that up, and then once it's gluing rigid the next day, actually I just did this one a couple hours ago. I basically, you know, you got to figure out what the diameter is just by eyeballing it. Sometimes you'll do one or two until you get it. If it's a little bit larger, that's good because you can just board sand the piece. And it'll take it down some, and then what I did was I just chamfered the edges until I got it down. You can see this cylinder, how I skinned it. See how there's a little bit of a lip there? See that? Well, this just, I'm going to put that, line that up to the seam on the rear where how I skinned that cylinder. This is how I did all the extractor, all the cylinders, the piles on the barge slip, etc. So I'm just going to glue that in like that, and that'll be nice and solid. And then I can hone out that hole a little bit better and to put a pipe in there. So it's looks like a little lunar module, doesn't it, from the 70s, eh? Or the 60s, like Saturn or Apollo 13. Anyway, that's how I do that. Okay, I just want to show you how to make easy gussets here. So this is just a strip of 10 thou. I cut this from sheet. You don't have to use strip if you don't want to. You can just cut strips with a straight edge. So I just made incremental marks so they're roughly square. It doesn't really matter if the little squares are square. I mean, they can be rectangular. I mean, just depends on the style of the gusset. This is pretty much a square gusset. Then I just scribe the pencil line, and then I just 45 a line across from the top to the bottom line like that. Simple. And then I just take these and just bend them, and they pop and just come apart and form gussets. Okay. Just like that. Easy gussets. You can make hundreds of them in short order. Now, the one thing I want to point out that I'm going to show you how these hoses work is this is a tip. I think I got this many years ago from Model Railroad Craftsman, I'm pretty sure. You know, because I'm kind of old school, right? Before social media modeler kind of thing. But even though I think social media is fantastic now. But so this is a piece of solder, right? So you can get different diameters of solder for different scales for N, H, O, and O, right? Just depending on the gauge of the solder. And then this is shrink tube, right? And they also come in different sizes too. So you just find the one that it fits in nice, almost like can still slide in, and then just take a lighter, right? And then just shrink it onto the solder. And it's so awesome, right? Like it looks like awesome rubber hose. Like you can add weight to it, right? Like you can stretch it down straight, hanging, right? Like I'll show you with this. And it's whoever came up with this idea, thank you very much. If you see this video, I don't know who they were, but anyway, thank you very much for that. Now, the air dryer's done, and what I did was I improvised a little bit, like I added this little safety step ladder going over the pipe because you'll see how this air system feeds this vacuum system. So I added that with some handrails, and you'll see that on the layout. I'll explain that more because you'll be able to see the whole scene better. And then before I go into this part, I just want to show you the vacuum system and how I changed it a bit. Like this one's lower down to the ground, and it actually the vacuum, I think they have a like another way of retrieving the grain or the product that it goes into another bin over here or something. I'm not really sure. But the way I did mine is it's going to go into the brewery, see, through here. It comes down into the funnel, and then it's going to go into the brewery for processing. But it's basically built the same way. So you can see that the air dryer, you know, takes the air and it pressurizes, goes up this manifold and then down into the bunker and aerates the grain or the barley or whatever. And then it gets sucked up through this pipe right here into this bin, and it's stirred and aerated more. Okay, you can see the air dryer feeds into the top here. So the key is to keep it dry, to dry it, right? And then it goes into the, you know, through the back here, it just goes up against the wall. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to change this, like improvise it a bit. So I added a slurry recovery system. So there's this bunker under here. I added a hatch here, an inspection door and stuff, or hatch. And then there's a motor under this block, this little bunker right here with a inspection plate as well. And then I also added an electrical box here with a kill switch on off. And I just left this door open a bit with the locking, you know, mechanism open, which I thought was a nice touch. So now I want to show you how this works. And then we'll go up to the layout and I'll show you what it looks like up there. So this is basically kind of like a pole crane, right? And it sits up here on this apparatus here. Because what I wanted to do is I not only want to drop grain on that location, but I want to be able to recover the slurry as well, you know, or acid in some cases. But in this case, there would be slurry built up in the bunker below. So I wanted the ability to do that. So I used that solder and I made this rubber hose. So this will go like this. Okay. And I can hang it down. And then here's the hose for pressurizing the hopper cars as well, which will go on like this. Okay, with a little on-off handle, like air valve. And then I can basically, you know, shape that solder hose any way I want, just like that, right? And then this hooks up like that and it sits in place. Isn't that cool? And then I can keep the hose separate and paint the unit. So I'm going to take you up top and just show you, before I paint it, I want you to see what it looks like in place on the layout, okay? Okay, so you can see how it goes into place, right? I'll show like another pic later when it's painted and stuff. So the idea is it'll take grain. There's the drop hatches down into the silo in the bunker, the concrete pads beside it. I still got to do out a couple of other little things here. And then if I want to unload, let me just move this hose out of the way. If I want to unload slurry, right? Use my fat hands. The car comes in and there's the slurry hose there. It's got two grab handles, right, on each side. And they just pull the car up and they offload the acid or the slurry right into the car, right? And I really love it. I love the way it panned out, because now this area has purpose for several cars. I mean, I can bring hoppers in here with barley or whatever, and slurry cars. And I never, you know, I always wondered about slurry cars, like what would it look like, you know, for an industry or facility. And this is a great idea, I think. I'm really glad I did it. Okay, so I just want to talk about this for a couple of minutes. So you can see that what I've done here is I've basically sprayed both these, well, three of these model components. I left the hoses out. I'll do those by hand, the fittings on the end of the hoses, with a German gray XF63. So people have asked about primer. Like, to me, XF is primer in theory, or actually technically it is. It's just it's a flat base paint, really, right? It's built in. You can choose whatever primer color you want. You can paint it tan colored, yellow, desert yellow. That's a primer. They use that color on vehicles, automobiles all the time. At least Seekins did back in the day. You can use gray, light gray, whatever. You're just going to put paint over top of it anyway. So why add an extra thick coat of primer, especially from a spray bomb, and then soften all the sharp edges on the model that you just spent all the time scratch building, rivets, everything. You just start laying on all these layers of paint. Like, why? Like, what's the reason? Like, this is just basically the primer coat, but it's the actual pre-shade. You know what I mean? So that's what I did. And the nice thing about thin, again, and using the airbrush is you can get into all the areas that you can't normally get with a traditional brush. And you don't build up excess paint. You can see how the coverage on that is very good, right? You know what I mean? It's just microscopic. There's no, like, you didn't lose any of the integrity of the sharpness of the scratch build, the plastic in this case. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin down quite a bit this XF12. I've talked about thinning before. I can make, excuse me, by default I usually make 4 bottles out of 1 with Tamiya when I use an airbrush, because I can just build it up, and end up with 3 bottles left or more, and it just gives the paint legs to go a long distance, right? But I've talked about that. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to dust over like the highlights of this with Jan Gray, and then when I'm done, the airbrush part of it is over quite quickly, actually, and then I'm going to do the rest by hand with Vallejo, wet on wet. I'm going to wet them down. Just going to start flooding in colors and highlights, and that's just the style that I like to paint. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's kind of the fun part, because the spray part is fun too, and it's essential, but it's not an environment I always like to be in. I want to be clean air, right, and water, right, no toxicity, and fun, okay? Okay, so here's some flat white, but I added a little bit of deck tan to it. It's really thin. Like, I've had this white for I don't know how long now. It's probably been right back to the warehouse days, but XF2, but add a little bit of deck tan into it, just to get away from that, just that white, colorless kind of, tone, right? Just to warm it up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just shoot it from up high, okay? You can see it on the paper here. You see how it's actually quite thin. So I'm just going to hit it from above, just sort of rain down like a light foggy kind of misting down on top of the high sides, okay? See that? So I could do a bit more, but why? We'll just stop there, okay? Because less is always better, because we're going to be adding subsequent layers to this as well, and I kind of like that, actually. Sometimes I overdo things a little bit, I'll admit that, but it's always a learning curve, right? Like, we never really master anything, because we're always trying to achieve greater heights and looks and things. So, but I always find that if we when we want to do a bit more, back off, because the airbrush can be like that. It's very addicting. Like, it makes the work so short that we said, no, I should be doing this longer. and you really don't have to, which is another reason why fundamentally I clean with this, because I'll have this airbrush cleaned in under 2 minutes. So, okay. Okay, so we're getting down to the sort of the base of the little model here. So I want to do this cement work. I think I'm just going to encompass the paint work, let whatever happens here on this metal plate, because I can chase it at the end with a bit of burnt umber and some light gray for galvanized kind of look. So here's the 4 colors, right? I zoomed in a bit closer to try so you can see this, but the only problem is I lose depth of field and, you know, footprint space to cover everything. But so you can see right here I got the concrete, right? And then I got the cement gray. And then I got the light USAAF light gray there, and then the blue gray. So these 4 colors is all you really need. And then notice I have just a little pinch of burnt umber there on the side. So you can do this all in one go, sort of one sitting if you want. You can work it all while it's wet, or you can lay on one layer and then another layer, wait till that dries. Sometimes it's good to let certain layers dry so you don't get mud, so it doesn't turn muddy. Muddy meaning all the colors just blend into one kind of color. Now that's usually, like, that'll happen like to people that are starting out in this kind of painting. So don't bum yourself out over that. That's just part of the learning curve. Like, you'll get over that eventually. You know, I never take my skill for granted, never, because I'm always learning. Like an example would be, people say, oh, when are you going to finish the tug? Well, you know what, the tug's going to be finished, but think of the things that I learn on this with building and paint that I can apply to the tug. If I had built the tug earlier, I would have missed that opportunity. Like that increase in skill and paint and so on. Like, it all kind of works collectively that way if you try to view it that way. So before I dive into this, just let me show you a couple wetting agents, because people have asked about it. So I have this bottle here, this larger bottle that I keep my water in for my acrylic paintings. And then I fill this up right to the top almost, and I put in about 4 or 5 drops of this wetting aid solution. Now, people say, oh, I use soap and everything. That's fine if you want, but this stuff's unbeatable. Like, I've tried everything, and I've been in this game a long time. This I've had now for the last, I've been using this for the last 4 or 5 years or so, I guess. Yeah, I guess so. And it's really good for stain painting. See, it says right on it, right? It says concentrated additive for reducing surface tension of water and for stain painting. I bet you a lot of you haven't heard of that, have you? Yeah, okay, well, that's what I'm doing, right? This is stain painting. Now, this goes a long ways. It's not the cheapest stuff. It's not super expensive. I think it was, I don't know, 12 bucks or something. So this will last me a couple of years probably. So I use that. Oh, did I mention this? Yeah, this is open thinner. This is what you add to it. Like, this is a little bit heavier than a water type, but it actually to get higher viscosity. It actually slows the drying time of the acrylic paint. So it's good for doing glazes and stuff like that. But anyway, so when you use this water, what happens is, like, if you take regular water and you apply it onto a cylinder like this, let's say that's been already pre-painted, what you'll see is the water starts to retract and bead off, right? But it won't when you use this in your water. It won't do that. It'll cover over it beautifully and cling to the whole surface of the model, okay? That's why I use it, right? I'm not, and hashtag no sponsor. I'm not sponsored by Golden or Liquitex. I just use what I feel is the best for my style of painting. And this is stain painting, and that's what it's for. So I'm going to just soak, I'm going to grab a bigger brush here. I want to just really wet it down, this concrete slab. Notice how I'm handling the model. I just painted it 5 or 10 minutes ago, and it's dry. I can basically handle, I mean, I wash my hands a lot, keep them clean, but it doesn't leave any fingerprints, or to me is that way too. It dries super fast, and it dries even faster when you use isopropyl alcohol. And Tamiya, I mean, that's part of the reason why I thin with IPA all the time, because the dry rate is off the charts. So it's economy of paint, right? Economizing your time. Not everybody has, you know, oodles of time to sit. Okay, so now I got these 4 colors here, so what am I going to do, right? So I like to start with the cement with light to dark, but I can take either blue, gray, or this light gray, but I like to just try a couple of different colors like that, like of these two. Because I can chase it around with water, and as long as it's wet, it's not going to kick off. Like, it's not going to dry on you. Not right away. Like, it'll take a while. Because the one thing about acrylic, when it does kick, you're going to have troubles moving it. So what I want to do is just get some on there of these 2 colors. Just splash it around. Just stab some on. Okay? Like that. And just watch what it does. Because that flow, remember that wetting aid I told you it's in water, will grab it and just spread it around. And it'll make all kinds of little tide marks and anomalies. And you want those with cement. Okay, so now, do you know what I'm going to do here? Is I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to let this dry like that. Because I'm okay with the variations of the colors. And because I'm going to put, see this cement here? Oh, sorry. This cement and concrete, cement, concrete, right? 2 compatible colors, beautiful washes together. I'm going to put those over top of this, and then I could add in a little more of these lighter later, like, and you'll see, okay? So while that one's drying, I'm going to do this slab. Make sure it's wet. And I'm just going to stab in a bit of color. See how there was tide marks all over this part? Well, see what happens when you cover it? It just becomes part of, you know how you get algae on concrete and it goes black and stuff. Let the water do a lot of the work for you, because it'll do things that you can't normally choreograph with a brush, like as you're thinking about it. Right? Just let it do the work for you. See how I just slopped it on there? The trick to cement over plastic, you know, I've heard people say, oh, nothing beats plaster for cement. Well, it's just not true, right? Because it's all an illusion at the end of the day. And plastic has a texture too if you rough sand it. And it holds paint beautifully, and it's way more stable than plaster is. I know I saw a guy that did a intermodel industry, and he used all plastic, and he painted it. It looked just awesome. He just decided he didn't want to pour plaster all over his track. I use both. I use plastic and wood for cement. So I'm going to leave that, let that dry, because if I don't, like if I try to put these colors on now, it'll turn it to mud, and I don't want that. If I let this dry, when I put these colors over top, these colors will stay in play because they're not going to move. But if you do it too early when it's wet, they will. So do a couple colors, let it dry, and then come back, wet it down again, and then put these darker colors over top, and just, you'll see what happens. The magic of paint and water. Okay, so what I did was I had to let this dry. So I have some staining there that, even though there's subtle tide marks, like I really like that. Like, you know, I talk about tide marks. Sometimes I'll say flood marks, because when you flood with water, sometimes it'll leave, like when the water dries and evaporates, it doesn't evaporate evenly. And you can see right here, see that tide mark? That is a desirable tide mark when you're doing cement or concrete. So if anybody tells you, oh yeah, the only problem with, you know, that paint is it leaves tide marks, well, no, you can erase the tide marks several ways. You can control them with water, you can cover them up, or you can airbrush them away and let them show through time. Like there's so many, like don't ever worry about process, right? Like I show process on this channel and people make judgment calls, and that's good. Like you should judge the work or you should criticize it. for whatever reasons that you want, and that's okay. I mean, I'm putting it myself out there, right? But because you're seeing things in process, like I don't put much weight on this moment right now, because in 5 minutes or an hour from now or tomorrow, things are going to change, right? So, but if I don't show you the process, then how are you going to know if it's just show and tell? Oh, look, I built it and then I painted it. Look at it. Isn't it nice? Like, that's not fair, is it, right? I want to share it. So, because it's all the things in between that you don't normally see is where you learn stuff. Okay, so now remember one thing. Okay, so the one a mistake that people make when they do wet on wet stain painting, and I do it too. I really do. Wet the surface, right? You forgot to wet it down, right? If the paint's not working or the method's not working, you forgot to wet it down. And did you add some of this to your water? Okay, because this, trust me, like you'll wonder, well, what's this? Does it really make a difference? Yes, it does. It makes all the difference, right? It allows the water, it takes the tension out of the water when it goes onto the surface, especially smooth surfaces where it just wants to bead off. Even if the surface is textured and has tooth. I'm going to wet this one down too, even though it might evaporate before I get to it, but I might. But the thing is with this wetting agent, the water doesn't evaporate as fast as just plain tap water. But it's just tap water with wetting agent, right? Okay, so I really like that. So I don't really want to lose too much of that. So now, remember the 4 colors? The blue gray, there's the USAF light gray, there's the what they call concrete, and then cement gray. So I've already used these 2 colors. Oh, sorry. I've already used these 2, right? So those 2 caused this, believe it or not. But then there's the underlying color, the Tamiya, right? Which doesn't get reactivated when you use water. So now I'm going to take some of this cement and I'm just going to wet my brush. And I'm going to drop in cement colors. Just blob it on, then chase it with a wet brush and water. These metal parts I'm going to do last, because if they're galvanized steel, there's lots of gray with metals and stuff. See, this cement color is really cool. Like when you put it over top of this blue gray and light gray, it just seems to, like it's that third layer that really starts to transform into what, you know, we normally see as, you know, concrete, right? Concrete slabs. And they get all kinds of crazy colors in them. Like shades of gray, I mean. Okay, so you can see it's got kind of almost a creamy kind of... And the neat thing is about some of these Vallejo colors is when you're putting them on, you go, okay, that looks kind of cool. But when it dries, sometimes they'll oxidize and they'll surprise you. And you go, oh, wow, that's cool. Okay, so put that one aside for now. And then let's get some in here. Even though you probably won't see a lot of this one. Hope I didn't run off camera there. But okay, let's see. Remember, you're not painting over all those previous layers, right? You're just putting another light, thin filter over top. Okay? And then we'll show you this concrete. Okay, so we'll just finish this up then. But before I put that final wash on, I just want to show you with this GAC 500, I'm just going to make this little sight glass on the side of the vacuum canister here. See right here? That's the only thing I could figure out what that was on the photo. There's It looks like a sight glass on the side of the canister. It's a vacuum canister right here. So I put that on the model. So I just take some of this GAC 500. It's just white milky, but it dries crystal clear. And it makes for great little window dressings like this. I just fill it. Sometimes you got to put a second coat the next day, but it'll dry crystal clear. You see right through it. And it's great for doing this, for doing portholes on ships and stuff too. So I'll just leave that. Now what I'm going to do is just wet this down again, and then just put on some of this cement concrete as a final kind of wash. It's sort of a darker, earthy tone wash that helps to kind of reconcile all the colors together in a sort of cementy kind of finish to it. You don't need much of it. In fact, I can just use this brush actually. So what I'm going to do probably to finish this off camera is, because it's too fiddly, is I'm going to put the yellow sort of safety stripes. I'm just going to use decals from some locomotive decals or something or whatever. I'll find something in my parts box or decal box. And there you can see that helps out a little bit. Now I'm going to take a little bit of, for these metal, you know, for the metal plates, take some of this burnt umber and just run it around the edge of the hatch like that. So that's all you really need. If it gets away on you, just grab more water. Even though they're aluminum or galvanized, they still rust over time. Try some deep sea gray here. See what that does. There's some slurry stains. Probably going to have some acidic properties to it. Okay. That looks pretty good. Alrighty. I'll let that dry and then we'll go have a look at it on the layout. Okay, so there we have it. Basically 3 new components to complete the brewery industry now. We have an air dryer that pressurizes and dries the air when it siphons off the barley from the silo into this extractor and then into the building. We also have a sump pump, this hose that you see here. That's for offloading into slurry cars. So it's pretty cool now, right? So it's probably a good idea to try to build in options on a small short line like this, because you want to maybe have your lines serve a dual or even a triple purpose. So in this case, I can bring flat cars in, I can bring grain cars like barley, etc., and slurry cars and probably chemical cars into this particular industry, which is great. It just helps to maximize your operational options on a smaller layout like this. And it's even a good idea on a larger layout too, to add some depth to the locals that you already have. Okay, so thanks a lot for watching. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Thank you to all my subscribers, all the new subscribers. I just want to wish you happy modeling, and I hope you have a great day. Okay, cheers.